What is going on, crypto enthusiasts? Happy Wednesday. Man, it's going to be a great day today. I'm hoping you guys are enjoying your week. We had an amazing pump for BTC. I guess the bigger question is this going to be one big giant fake out, or are we going to see extended pump? That's exactly what we're going to dive into right now. I want to bring your guys' attention to lower time frames first, because this is essentially where I'm kind of mapping out some ideas. Now, keep in mind, we have FOMC day today. We could see a big reverse Uno in the market, or we can be ultimately dealt that wild card and pump to higher levels. So from a technical perspective, what I'm looking at this being a completion of wave 3. This is something that we've been discussing inside my corner for a couple weeks now. We had some minor waves, but we're just not out of the woods yet. I think this is something that's still playing into that bearish wave 4 count. I'll share that with you here shortly. But on the 89-minute right now, I can see that we tapped right into that 33.91, that 1.618 level that we were discussing. And now it makes sense for us to have some form of a cool down in the days to come, or at least by the end of the week. I'm gauging between the 11th and through the 17th. So I would anticipate a cool down by the 11th to complete. I'm basing this off of fib zones. I'll share that with you guys here in a second, but these are the levels that I'm looking at for us to be tapping into. As a matter of fact, we actually have some liquidity that sits right inside these zones. When we start mapping out these areas, there's a nice little cluster that sits right over here, and there's a big giant pocket that sits inside this zone. So I'm targeting essentially these levels, these areas. Currently, I am sitting short. I did hedge a short against my long, and I'm going to be looking for add backs to my longs inside of these areas. So I'm looking for these levels to act as a point of support. Invalidation for me is going to be somewhere if we start closing below these levels right over here. Right, if we get into these 27, 28 levels, then I feel like we're going to be definitely going a lot lower. Now, invalidation for the short to the downside is going to be if wave 3 just continues to pump, and let's say wave 3 essentially was not complete, and let's just go to a 2.618 level. That's us pumping all the way up into these levels. And again, we do have a bullish scene for that. It still falls under bearish retest levels. We have to ultimately reclaim that level, hold above it for the remainder of the week and going into the next couple of weeks. At that point, then we're looking at 4600s plus inside those realms. But for right now, let's work with what we have from a technical perspective. So this cluster is essentially what I'm looking at as far as targeting, coming back into this area and then longing back into these zones. We do have some clusters that sit just above that, right around 34.79 inside these areas. But in the event that we sweep these, because these are low numbers in the sense of volume, then I would anticipate from the mathematical perspective, we get into the 3600s. Now I'm going to flip over to a daily just as a quick reminder as to the map that we were gauging. As far as the bearish retest, we've broken this level right over here, 31.26. That was going to be the bare minimum for a wave 4. But we can see that there's a little bit more clusters that sit inside this area, and it gets a little bit thicker inside this zone right over here. So essentially still bearish retest levels. Whenever we get into these levels, then I would anticipate we have either a truncation where we have what would look like a double bottom, or maybe a little bit potentially shorter. But we can see where there's a good amount of liquidity, especially inside these areas right over here. There's a point of control that sits right around 25.16, and you can see where that liquidity is sitting inside these areas. So it's something just to take into consideration. But like I said, for the time being, we're going to go back over to an 89-minute, and we're going to view these setups. Right now, we are running hot on these candles, which ultimately we want to see some form of a cool down. What we were discussing is for a bounce inside these areas. We did have a minute wave count that fell into this area. There was a fair value gap that sat right over here in this area. We obviously filled that and tapped right into this order block inside this zone. And so we're looking for this type of candles as we get into the later parts of this week. We want to see a cool down, and potentially we could see that in one swoop with FOMC today. So that's something to be cautious of, but it's crypto. It can go either way. We could see a massive pump into this area and then a big giant retrace down into these levels over here. There is a good amount of liquidity that sits inside here, sitting around 63%. liquidity, so we can see a sweep into this zone, into these levels, and then see a deep retrace. So just be on guard. If anything, sit to the side if you don't have a short already built inside these levels. And if you're definitely not long, I wouldn't be longing at these levels, even if it does spike right back up. I think that's a recipe for a round trip and maybe just bang your head against the keyboard. I'd definitely be looking for these lower levels where we get into flat levels right around 3057 and down a little bit lower. Could it come a little bit shorter than that? It could go to a 2.36 level, which I'll put that on here for us just so we can have the visuals of that. Right, we can get to these levels and that could still be considered a wave or fall flat. There's just not that much liquidity here in that area, so I think it would make a little bit more sense to fill in this huge fair value gap that we see right here, and then once we get to these zones, start potentially looking at it. Smart money moves, I typically would be looking at these levels. I think this is where institutional money will be coming in, trying to take out all of these longs here in this area. People in disbelief know ETH is not going to retrace that hard. And we all know what ETH is notorious for. ETH is notorious for retracing its pumps. So this kind of makes sense just based on the characteristics of how ETH works altogether. Now, if you guys have any questions for me, any confusions about the setups, feel free to reach out to me inside of the war room, or feel free to shoot me a private DM. More than happy to assist you. Outside of that, please be safe today on both sides, whether you're shorting or you're longing. Have tight risk management. We will be discussing some new setups and some new ideas in our Thursday crypto class tomorrow at 8 a.m. So be ready for that. And above all, be profitable, guys. God bless you. I'll catch you soon. Peace.